Nvidia stock falls after report shows that Google and Meta are in talks for a multi-billion-dollar chip deal. Nvidia publicly responds to losing $250 billion to Google deal. Nvidia stock falls 4% on reports that Meta will use Google AI chips. What the hell is going on? Seriously, we're in utter chaos nowadays. My favorite graphics card company for video games is at war with my favorite search engine from the 2000s, and it's all over AI nonsense. There is actually an interesting story here, which is the history of chip manufacturing and how GPUs accidentally became essential, to the introduction of all this fancy AI stuff. But this deep war between Google and Nvidia is fascinating. Historically, Google's had their one main competitor that they would focus on and not really pay attention to others. A long time ago, it was Yahoo. They crushed them. They moved on to Microsoft, got bored. They moved on to Apple, got more bored, focused on Amazon for a while, and now it seems like Nvidia is the one that they have focused square in their sights. As we see here, Google's only actual competition when it comes to revenue is Meta, because Google and Meta are the only two competent ad networks ever made, but they would rather partner with their current number one competitor than potentially lose long-term to a competitor that's not even really on their radar right now. There are so many layers to this, from how Google hates Nvidia so much that they use CPUs for inference, to the weird relationship between Google and their TPU division and Meta and all these other layers, to how the industry is currently responding, and also my AMD stock falling rapidly. Quick disclosures, I'm invested in basically every single company we're going to be talking about today. Not enough that it matters, but enough that I feel the obligation to disclose it. And when I just checked my portfolio, I lost a lot of money today, so let's make a little back with today's sponsor. I have something a little embarrassing to share with you guys. You know that I picked tech based on what lets my team move the fastest without compromises. I made some mistakes, in particular with our auth. The choices I made for auth were making it really hard to scale. So obviously I have to roll my own, right? There's no way that these off-the-shelf providers are the solution. Well, I actually picked a solution that's pretty common. The solution I picked is used by everybody from OpenAI to Vercel to FAL to SourceGraph to Carta, the people who manage my cap table for my company. So obviously this has to be a really well-established open source standard that anyone can adopt and roll themselves, right? Turns out that's not the right solution for auth. Auth has so many little things to get right across the services, the platform, the integrations, and everything else in between that doing it yourself is not worth it. Take it from me, someone who convinced themselves it was for years. It even built a whole stack around it. That's why we moved T3 Chat over to WorkOS. Yes, we're now another WorkOS app, just like all the other companies I showed you. It has made our lives so much easier already. We're finally going to be able to introduce additional auth options without breaking our service. And man, we can finally get those business customers that were hitting us up a long time ago, but we had no path forward because we couldn't onboard them until we had the admin portal. Seriously, this makes life so much easier for those big companies we're trying to onboard. And if you wonder how much it costs us, right now, $0. And that's not because they're sponsoring me. I keep those things separate. That's because the first 1 million users are free. Check them out now at soydev.link/workos. So what the hell's going on between Google and Nvidia? Apparently, allegedly, this all started from this one particular post on Google's blog. 3 things to know about Ironwood, our latest TPU. I don't know why they worded this like a BuzzFeed article, but we'll go with it. Our 7th gen tensor processing unit is here. Learn what makes Ironwood our most powerful and energy efficient custom silicon to date. Before we go too deep in Ironwood, I want to talk a bit about the key players in the AI value chain. There are 4 pieces to AI experiences. There's the application that you actually use to work with the AI. There's the foundation models, like the actual giant piles of tokens and parameters that we're using to generate responses. There's the inference, which is the cloud that you're spending the money on and have the dashboard in that actually hosts the models. And then there's the accelerator hardware, which is the CPUs, GPUs, TPUs, and the chips themselves that are being used to generate those responses. There are a handful of companies that are playing with the bottom 2 sections, like Grok or Cerebras, for example, and also Samba Nova. These companies built their own architectures to try and make inference faster, and they also have their own cloud providers that you can go pay money to generate inference from, primarily from open weight models, because they don't have access to the proprietary models from Anthropic, Google, and OpenAI. OpenAI, Anthropic, and Google all also have their own cloud inference. They have both made partnerships strategically with other people in the space, like OpenAI working with Microsoft so that you can use their models on Azure and only on Azure right now, and Anthropic, which lets you use their models on Google through Vertex on GCP, as well as on Amazon through Bedrock. Microsoft has dabbled in models a little bit, but they're more focused on application layer, like Copilot, or on the cloud layer with Azure. Google's the only player doing all of it. Google is building apps that we use for inference. They're not very good. The Gemini website is one of the worst AI experiences I've ever had. It breaks in so many ways. It makes Claude seem like stable software. But it's there, and I guess it works. More importantly, though, Google has the most popular AI app ever made. I'm going to Google search for who has the most popular AI. And according to the most popular AI, it's actually ChatGPT, which is particularly funny because the correct answer isn't ChatGPT. It's the very box saying that it's ChatGPT. The most popular AI in the world right now, by far, is the AI overview you get now when you do a Google search. This is the biggest AI app by far. So even if Google's Gemini stuff sucks, not the model can be good, but the Gemini website, like gemini.google.com, is really, really rough. If you want the models to be less painful when you use them, especially the image model, consider trying out T3 Chat. It's $8 a month. You get access to every single model. If you want to use this for generating images with the new Nano Banana Pro or trying out all the new models, if you're subscribing for the first time, use code NANO at checkout and your first month will only be $1. I have a feeling you'll really like it. There's a reason we built it. It's because every other AI chat genuinely sucks to use. If you don't believe me, spend $1 to prove me wrong. Back to the report though. Google's the only company that is playing on all of the layers. They have apps like Google.com and also Gemini. They have foundation models because the Gemini models are actually quite good. They have cloud inference. As much as I hate GCP, it's effectively necessary because GCP is the only place to host Gemini models, and it's one of the only 3 places to host Anthropic models. And the part that we're all here for today, the accelerator hardware. There are not many players in this space. AWS is trying, but their stuff's still very far behind. Meta is considering exploring it, but they haven't gotten very far either, which is why they're partnering with Google. None of these other labs are touching it. Nvidia is obviously doing this. Their GPUs are being used for a lot of the stuff. And then we have these bespoke companies that are doing like one-off inference as a service things like Grok, Cerebras, and Samba. And then AMD that is literally just doing this and nothing else. But there really aren't that many players making new chips for doing AI work. One last thing to know about this chart is that there's different methods for building the accelerator hardware. Nvidia is using GPUs, as is AMD. The GPUs are graphics processing units. They're built for doing rendering of graphics because if you have a lot of pixels on a screen, it's not very good to have 4 cores when you can have 4,000 dumber cores for doing that type of math. GPUs do a lot of really small things rather than a small number of really hard things, which is why they're really good at this type of matrix transformation bullshit. But theoretically, you could make something even better for it. This happened with cryptocurrency back in the day where Bitcoin would be mined on graphics cards, and eventually ASICs were built, which were machines made specifically just to do mining really efficiently. They couldn't play games. Like, you're not going to run a game on an ASIC, maybe Doom, but it's meant to be a specific chip for this one particular task. That's what Grok is doing. That's what Cerebras is doing. That's what Samba Nova is doing. They're making specific chips for the task of doing inference. And most of those are built heavily around the way that Llama worked, which is why all those companies originally just hosted Llama and eventually other things that were distilled on top of Llama. Google is going a lot further with TPUs. It seems like Google just doesn't like GPUs for a ton of different reasons, but here they're really trying to make TPUs work. There's a post I've been trying to find for a long time and can't, but there's a very similar one from Rune I'm going to use here. Unfortunately, machine consciousness is an emergent property of GPU computation. TPU models can't ascend. This is from 2023. Very funny. It's clearly meant to be a joke, but the point is that it's absurd that we think that GPUs, these things that were built for doing graphics processing, are the end-all be-all of inference and AI. That's not what they were built to do. It just so happens that of all of the things that existed when we made the Transformer discoveries, GPUs were the things that mapped best to those systems. That doesn't mean we can't make something better. It just means GPUs did a much better job than CPUs for training these transformers. It is also worth noting that this is only the case for training, not necessarily for execution. When you're actually doing the inference, there's been a lot of promising research that shows CPUs can be used pretty effectively for inference as well. There's a lot of rumors that Google uses CPUs for a ton of their inference, and those are bolstered by the research they publish, like this paper, Improving the Speed of Neural Networks on CPUs, published by 3 Google employees. I wonder why. From various different sources, both public and private, I can relatively confidently say that there's a lot of CPU work going on over in the Google offices, where there's much more stuff running on CPUs than GPUs, possibly even training, although not positive on that. They do have quite a bit more TPUs as of the new Ironwood architecture, which supposedly is now generally available. Today's frontier models, including Gemini, Theo, Imagen, and Anthropic's Claude, all train and serve on tensor processing units. Train, probably, serve, sometimes. For many organizations, the focus is shifting from training these models to powering useful, responsive interactions using the same models. Constantly shifting model architectures, the rise of agentic workflows, plus near exponential growth in demand for compute defines this new age of inference. In particular, agentic workflows that require orchestration and tight coordination between general-purpose compute and ML acceleration are creating new opportunities for custom silicon and vertically co-optimized system architectures. That's a lot of words for we made chips that are good. Apparently, their new chips are up to 10 times faster at peak from the V5P version they had before, and 4x better per chip for both training and inference workloads compared to the most recent version, Trillium, which makes it their most powerful and energy-efficient custom silicon to date. They also have an N series, which is ARM-based, which is more traditional execution, and crushes x86-based VMs. These are going to be bare metal instances, so you can run code on servers that are ARM-based using their ARM chips. They put a lot of work into their ARM research because they wanted to make their own phone processors, and they still kind of suck. But it's cool they're stuffing them in servers, but the TPU stuff is really where they're killing it. This is what they've been doing for a while, including the video encoding units for YouTube. I don't know if you know this, but you don't actually use your CPU to decode media most of the time. You can do it. Most processors are powerful enough, but they're not very efficient at it, and it will make everything else on your device way slower. Even something really powerful and fancy like the M series chip in my MacBook Pro here can decode video relatively well using the CPU, but they choose to use hardware encoder chips they put on the die so that the actual CPU isn't hit when video is being decoded or even encoded. YouTube's been investing heavily in this for a while because they have to re-encode a lot of video, like hundreds of hours every second, at a ton of different resolutions, so they built their own hardware to make it more efficient. They built these processors to enable breakthroughs in performance that are only possible through deep system-level co-design, with model research, software, and hardware development under one roof. They say here that they have the model research, software, and hardware under one roof, and then directly underneath here, a quote from Anthropic, who notably isn't under Google's roof. Our customers, from Fortune 500 companies to startups, depend on Claude for their most critical work. As demand continues to grow exponentially, we're increasing our compute resources as we push the boundaries of AI research and product development. Ironwood's improvements in both inference, performance, and training scalability will help us scale efficiently while maintaining the speed and reliability that our customers expect. Yeah, Google and Anthropic got relatively close, even though AWS also invested in Anthropic. And I was using these chips. This is probably why Meta is jumping in. Every company that wants an absurd amount of GPUs for training is having to deal with Nvidia's borderline extortion pricing. Nvidia can kind of charge whatever they want and get away with it because they're still the best option by far. If you want generic, large numbers of processes on reasonable, scalable architecture, you're kind of stuck with Nvidia. You can't go to a store and buy a Google chip. You can't necessarily get a contract with them for a bunch of these either because they want to keep them in their warehouses and their servers on their cloud platform. Nvidia doesn't even really have a cloud platform. They've dabbled with it here and there. I know a lot of people are asking us to add the Nvidia provider to T3 chat. You cannot pay for the Nvidia provider. There is no way to go to nvidia.com, sign up for their inference, and pay them per token for usage. They bought a company for GPU rentals, and they now kind of provide that as a service, but it's entirely separate and not like Nvidia's core business. They don't offer inference. You buy GPUs from Nvidia. You don't rent inference capabilities from their servers. Google does charge you to use their servers in their warehouses, so them also selling the chips kind of defeats the purpose of their whole business model. Why would they sell you the chip when they can rent it to you in their own server warehouses? Most companies that have both choose to do that. Like Grok, Cerebras, and Sambanova, none of those companies are selling their chips to anyone. They're making the chips, hosting the chips, and charging you for the inference. Google seems weirdly interested in doing both. I don't actually think they care that much. I don't think they intend to start selling a lot of TPUs, I think they just want to make Nvidia choke a bit. And boy, have they choked. This is from the official Nvidia Newsroom Twitter account. We are delighted by Google's success. They made great advances in AI, and we continue to supply to Google. Nvidia is a generation ahead of the industry. It's the only platform that runs every AI model and does it everywhere that computing is done. Nvidia offers greater performance, versatility, and fungibility than ASICs, which are designed for specific AI frameworks or functions. This is them trying their best to save their own stock as this deal happens. It's absolutely adorable. Yeah, TinyCorp in the replies. Those M dashes were generated on an Nvidia GPU. Yeah. This all comes from an information report from earlier this week that Google's in talks with Meta to do a multi-billion-dollar deal for AI chips and data centers in 2027. Again, because Nvidia is hardballing all of these negotiations. There's a legitimate possibility here that Meta has no intention to ever use these chips and that they're just doing this in order to get a better deal in negotiation with Nvidia. Because Nvidia's market cap is currently 4.5 trillion. So if this costs them 2.5% in their stocks, it just dropped that much. That's $112 billion. They could just give the GPUs to Meta for free and have saved money. The fact that a best case $5 billion deal just wiped $112 billion off the market is kind of insane. Meta is playing hardball here. Zuckerberg just came in the room, was like, yo, Nvidia, can you give us a deal? Jensen said no. Said, oh, seems like that stock's pretty big. It'd be a shame if something happened to it. And then made something happen. That's insane. There's an actual chance this is a 500 IQ play from Zuck to piss off Jensen enough to give him a deal. As they call it in the Yahoo article, right now, most of the tech giants use the chips via the cloud, not by buying them. As they say here, Google rents access to their chips, which are their tensor processing units, to AI developers through Google Cloud. This means the chips are confined to Google's own data centers, not sold externally as suggested by the information's report. Apparently, this isn't the only company they're talking about this with. Why did AMD fall more than Nvidia based on this? The fuck? Apparently, Anthropic's playing the long game with all of these people because they're also doing a bunch of stuff with Amazon and their new chips too. Fascinating. There are so many ways this can go, but honestly, I just don't see Google losing at this point. They might not end up number one long term, but there is no world where they're not at least third place. They are so well positioned here. They have become the Apple of AI, not in the sense that they're really polished and thoughtful, but in the sense that they own their whole destiny. No one can take this from them. They own their vertical. They're in a good spot. I would not want to compete with Google, and I am rethinking my entire investment portfolio. Thankfully, I don't tend to invest in these big companies as much as I do into much smaller ones, and I'm very thankful that the majority of my money is currently in early startups that are betting on any of these companies winning. Because a small startup that I'm betting on doesn't care if Google wins, if OpenAI wins, if Anthropic wins, or if Nvidia wins. They're just building good services on top. There's never been a better time to be a rapper, but man, if you're one of the big five, you're at fucking war right now. At the very least, this is a war that's fun to watch. This was an interesting one. I'm happy to get to talk about chips a bit more. Let me know what y'all think. And until next time, peace nerds.